right. So it's basically, this is a very difficult problem to solve, as I just said a minute ago. Which fund families, how many, which one do you pick? What do I turn on? Do I do timing? Do I not do timing? Etc. Right? So what I'm attempting to do here is I'm using the Fidelity Sector funds, which is what SectorSurfer was essentially built to look at. I selected the 19 longest funds, or the 19 funds with the longest time period history, that goes back to '89, and I'm selecting 10 out of 19 of those funds. Why am I selecting 10? Okay, well, what you can end up doing is by selecting 10 of 19, you have 92,000 different combinations, and so you can take a look at the entire, to some degree, the entire universe of sector funds and start doing, if you do enough sampling, and start to answer your question, at least for the sector funds, in terms of, okay, does walk-forward testing hurt me? Okay. Let's see, is there anything else? Statistics, math, don't worry, it's a bunch of curves. What I did is I put, the process was I selected, in this case, 20 funds, okay, or 20 combinations of 10 funds, unique combinations of 10 funds, put them into SectorSurfer, ran them the normal way, and then ran them with walk-forward testing. I dumped all the information out, and I figured out what the gain was in each case, okay? And the gain being the compound annual growth rate, okay? There's only 20 samples, so the statistics here are shaky. The next time we meet, I hope to have thousands of samples, okay? Next slide. All right, so here's the SectorSurfer result for the best 10 funds, okay, meaning a friend, a guy named John Nicholas, for those of you who know him, did this same exercise, and he sampled 2,000. And what you're looking at here is the best set of 10 funds out of 2,000, okay? And this is the painted path that I mentioned earlier, and you're getting a really nice number, 22.4%, okay? And the score is 51, okay? Next slide, okay? Now you turn on walk forward testing, strong filtering, so you're running the algorithm a second time, short-term trends only, okay? This is no timing, because I'm just going to take a look at what the trend algorithm is doing. You're down to 21%, and your score went down to 47. Not bad. It hit you a little, but not all that much. Next slide. Here's the worst set of 10 funds. Again, picked from 2,000 that were randomly selected. Okay. SectorSurfer for 25 years comes up with just under 20% and a score of 34. Okay, not bad for the 10 worst funds. Next slide. This is what happens when you do walk-forward testing. Okay, you lost 11% in the last 3 years. You made 3% in the last 10 years. Okay.
72% drawdown also from the wall.
Yeah. So
these are the worst funds.
These are the worst funds. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, this 25-year alert, this number here, this gain is artificially high because it has all this time back here where you've optimized the parameters, okay? So it's actually less than 16. Next slide. All right. So here's the end result of the 20 samples I took. This is the worst one right here, and this is the best one right here. You can tell because the numbers are there. This is the normal part of SectorSurfer, i.e. the way you normally run it, and this is with walk-forward testing. Okay? The reason these numbers, in general, don't match up with what SectorSurfer tells you is because I went back and I only compared the period where you were doing walk forward. Okay? I did not include the original 9 or 10 years when you had optimized parameters. Okay? That's why, for example, some of these numbers, if you go back and look at the SectorSurfer slides, you'll say, oh, well, that was 27%. Well, it's 22% because of those first 9 or 10 years. Next slide. All right, so if you look at this as two bell curves, okay, because you can do that, the blue line is SectorSurfer normally, the red line is SectorSurfer walk forward. This just shows you very visually that everything moves to the right, excuse me, left, okay? This is gain down here, okay? So effectively, the whole curve is moving. It also got a little bit wider. Next slide. You can present the same information by, if you will, adding up all the points on that bell curve. It's a cumulative probability distribution function. Like I said, you can use that tomorrow, you know, or tonight to impress your spouse. And what this says is, for example, when you're down, the worst 10% of the normal distribution is the equivalent of 65th percentile of the walk forward. That gives you some idea of how much that curve shifted. Okay. Next slide. Got 3 minutes. All right, so how much
We'll cut
money?
you some slack.
Okay. How much money did you lose when you turned on walk forward? This is the answer, the partial answer to your question. Okay, that's really what everybody wants to know. Okay. Well, it all depends. 84% of the time, when you turn walk forward on, which is close to what you would get in reality, you lost 4.6 to 5.7% compound annual return. That's between these 2 points. And you can see, you can pick any point on the curve you want, and it'll give you an idea of how much you're going to lose. It's not true. Next slide. You do the same thing, and now you just say, well, how much is it as a percentage of the amount of money I was making, right? All right, it's somewhere between 20 to 41% of your compound annual return goes away, okay? Next slide. All right, so here are the conclusions. All right, another one I have to do more samples, and that's a whole project in itself, but we'll get that done. And maybe the next meeting or two I can come back and talk a little bit about what happened afterwards, but I expect to see this. So if somebody asked me, you asked me, how much am I going to lose if I turn on walk forward testing? Regardless of the funds I'm putting in there, I'm going to give you a wishy-washy statement like, whatever normal SectorSurfer tells you, take 20% off. That's how much you're going to lose in terms of compound annual return. Okay, so if SectorSurfer tells you you're making 25%, reality is you're going to make no more than 20. Okay, very broad generic statement. Okay, now it is not surprising or as bad. Every optimizer in the world does this. I've worked with half a dozen to a dozen different optimizing tools. You optimize over all the time that you give it, it's going to give you a wonderful number. And then the next day, you won't be able to make that number.
Yeah.
So Scott has done us a good deed in terms of turning on that, giving you the walk forward capability, because you turn that on, and if you interpret it correctly, it'll tell you it's much more realistic about how much money you're actually going to make. He's also done us a favor by getting all those knobs, I talked about, to twiddle, because that will allow you to say, okay, this particular set of funds like long-term trends, don't like long-term trends. They like strong filtering, they don't like strong filtering, okay? So this is, I think of this talk more or less as a reality check, okay? But actually SectorSurfer is giving you all the tools to get a very realistic idea of what it is you're going to make and how you can twiddle those knobs to make a few bucks more, if you will. All right.
Question, Al.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything in this work that answers the question, is it always best to, if you're running a real portfolio of SectorSurfer, is it always best to run the algorithm today to select tomorrow's fund? In other words, is it always right to use all the data from yesterday and backwards to select tomorrow's fund?
Well, with respect to the tool, the answer to that question, my opinion, okay, is the tool really doesn't tell you that, because as someone asked earlier, you know, when you're at the right-hand edges of that chart, guess what? The parameters, unless you force them to be differently, okay, you're going to end up with the same set of SectorSurfer parameters, okay? So it doesn't help you in that sense, okay? I.e., you end up using all of history, okay? So you can't get away with it with what Scott is doing, okay? He uses all of history.
Okay.
To get away with it, you have to set up a window of 5 years or 10 years that you optimize in, okay? An optimization window. And he doesn't do that. He uses every bit of history he's had.
I see, thank you.
Okay. Now, I'm going to answer a question that I thought you were going to ask, okay? But I'll use you as a good excuse, okay? What do? I always run with log forward testing, okay? All the time. Because I think that gives you the most realistic view of what you're going to get, okay? And if I'm really interested, if I'm putting significant money on, I will actually get out the equity curve and do what I did here and figure out what is the actual gain during that period, and the drawdown, and the sharp, and everything else.
And the best set of those 4 numbers.
And the best set of those 4 numbers. And I have to admit, when I set those 4 numbers, always in the back of my head, there's this little finger pointing at me, scratching my head going, are you just overfitting? Are you playing a game of curve fitting? But my only honest answer is so far I don't think so. But I could be convinced otherwise. Let's see. Yeah, I'm 2 minutes over. Let's see. Okay. I think I've covered all this. I think this is the last slide too, right? Oh, I got one more slide.
Yes.
Next time, I'm going to do more samples. Okay, those of you who heard me talk earlier this week, I'm going to do the bootstrapping. Once you get a small set of samples, you can break them up and bootstrap them to get a large number of samples and get better statistics. I'm going to do that, okay? And maybe Joe will invite me back next time and I can chat about that. And then the second thing, once I get all these statistics, I can start comparing SectorSurfer to other trend following algorithms and answer the question, is SectorSurfer better? Is it about the same or is it worse? Okay, so I hope to get that done in 2 months. Don't know if I can guarantee to get it done in 2 months. All right, any questions? Yes, sir.
All the walk forward you had was in 6 months.
6 months, you have no control over that. That's just, it's the only thing you do. He said it. Okay. So again, very similar to this gentleman's question about back testing. You know, a lot of back testers out there will let you dial in the window you want to, back test over. They'll let you set start dates and end dates and do all sorts. I mean, he's got a very, very straightforward, simple approach, and he did that on purpose. Okay. As I think many, if not most of you know, for his own development system, he's got a much more complex version of SectorSurfer, okay, that he runs on his personal PC, and it can do all sorts of wonderful things, okay? But that would also drive the average SectorSurfer user up. You know, I'd love it, okay, I pay money for it, but the average SectorSurfer user would probably climb up a wall, okay, with that many knobs to the wheel. Other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, how about a round of applause?
And sorry for stealing 5 minutes of your time, Sid.
No problem. And by the way, I agree with the conclusion that Al has come to. I've done, as you guys know, who know me, thousands of hours of back testing and certainly hundreds of hours of walk forward testing. And anytime you take any tradable instrument and you optimize it over its whole data period of data, you're gonna get overly optimistic results. And so having a walk forward back test function is really, really useful, because it may not be the truth, but it's closer than what you had if you use all the data.
I'm surprised that the degradation was only 20%.
Yeah, me too. The stuff I do normally is a hell of a lot worse than that.
50, 70%.
Well, thank you again, Al, we sure appreciate it. Unfortunately, we're out of time as far as SectorSurfer is concerned. The presentation that I was going to make about what are the 5 locations for additional information on SectorSurfer, I'll put that into a video and I'll post it at investorshelp.net.